Welcome to the Big Time Strength Podcast, featuring small school strength coaches making the big time where they're at. Today, our host, Coach Preston Peterson, interviews a high school strength coach who is creating a big time strength conditioning experience for their student athletes. Today's episode is sponsored by Teambuildr. Teambuildr provides strength conditioning software to athletics programs around the country. Whether you write your own programs or want access to over 100 templates, Teambuildr can make your program more efficient, more accountable, and smarter when it comes to measuring your team's effort in the weight room. Visit their website and start a 14-day free trial at teambuildr.com. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy the episode.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Big Time Strength Podcast. Today, I get to interview Coach David Neill, the Director of Strength and Conditioning at Liberty Christian School in Argyle, Texas. He has been serving in his current position for almost 2 years. Prior to Liberty, Coach Neill spent 2 seasons as the assistant football strength and conditioning coach at the University of Texas, 3 seasons at the University of Cincinnati, and 1 season at Texas Tech. He began his coaching career at Texas Tech after playing there as a defensive and offensive lineman. Coach Neill played 3 years under Coach Leach and 2 under Coach Tubberville. In this episode, we talk about Coach's mission at his school and how he uses big moments to make an impact on his athletes, how he uses Teambuildr and Critical Reload to make his program top-notch, how he puts on strength clinics for his own coaches, some of the ins and outs of his programming, in season, out of season, his 6th and 7th graders all the way up to 12th grade. Just gives great insight for all of the listeners about how he structures the whole deal, his whole development series. And then he talks about what he's learning in the field right now and how he's going to apply that at Liberty Christian. Coach Neill is doing an awesome job at Liberty Christian School in Texas, and I really enjoyed talking to him about his program, and I can't wait for you to check it out. Hey, Coach Neill, I really appreciate you coming on the show today. Very awesome to be able to talk to you. Kind of looked around, tried to read as much as I could, and there has been some suggestions to reach out to you, and it looks like you got it going on down in Texas. Can you give us kind of a rundown of where you're at now, maybe where you've been in the past, and what you're looking to do here in the future? Yes,
Preston. I am the Director of Strength and Conditioning at Liberty Christian School in Argyle, Texas. It is a 5A school, which in TAPS, which is our private school leagues, the largest division. And I'm the first Director of Strength Conditioning at the school. So I've kind of built the program over the last 2 years, not from scratch, but as a unified program instead of coaches kind of doing their own thing. Before I got there, I was working at the University of Texas in Austin under Charlie Strong's staff with, I was an assistant strength coach with a football team under Coach Pat Moore. I spent some time at the University of Cincinnati before that, 3 years with Coach Joe Walker and Coach Tubberville. And before that, I served a year at Texas Tech, my first year post-playing career. I was an assistant strength coach on the staff there. And then I spent 5 years before that playing football at Texas Tech, where I played defensive line, offensive line, ton of special teams, pretty much everything that needed a big guy to hit somebody, I did. So that's how I got into strength conditioning. I really got my start because I loved football, I loved the weight room, but I hated the film room. So I needed something where I didn't have to do any X's and O's, but I could still coach guys. And the more I got into it and started talking to our strength coach, that just became a passion of mine. And the longer I've done this, the more I love it.
That's an exciting deal, being able to travel around a little bit like that and learn so much from each coaching staff. And then you're taking it back to your school now. Can you share some of the things that you learned at your stops before and then how you're applying that to where you're at now?
Absolutely. And I think the things you learn when you're coaching college, especially at the level I had the opportunity and the blessing to coach at, is just how to interact with your athletes. I think that's the biggest thing you take away from it, is when you're dealing with guys from all over the country and just boatloads of talent, and that presents challenges in and of itself. And you really learn to dig in with guys and how to approach them and how to work to motivate them. That's the hard part about it, right? Like the X's and O's in the science isn't complicated. We're squatting and benching, and yeah, there's a lot to it. But at the end of the day, what we're doing is, it's not rocket science. But the hard part is people. And by working with guys, I got to work with guys from Miami and from California and some athletes from a ton of money and some athletes from no money. We had guys who played in Australia. And so you get to really develop a relationship building skill that has helped me a ton in the current situation I'm in. That's where I really got away from that college level, was how to build relationships with guys.
Man, I just finished up Conscious Coaching by Brett Bartholomew, and he's talking about that.
I got to meet him a couple of weeks ago. He's awesome.
Yeah. So I bet you're connecting with that pretty hard as far as what he was talking about, the art and the science. And I really, truly believe it's like how you connect with people it's what's going to separate coaches. And yes, you need to know your X's and O's of strength and conditioning. But I think what you hit on the head right there, I would say from every experience that I've had in the past, it's just like, how can we interact with people to get the most out of them, right? And because that's what we're trying to do as a coach. I love that you said that. That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it's, at the end of the day, what we're doing is people if you're in this and you're not trying to build up young men and women and develop them character-wise first, you're going to burn out and you're going to fade out, because it's not as glorious as everybody thinks it is when they get into it. It's not as, I guess the image on the outside is not what it really looks like, but it's even better than that when you get, down and dirty and into kids' lives and the messiness of, especially teenagers, right? Like kids are, their lives are messy. And when you get to really dig in there and jump in and build those relationships and develop that trust and see them grow and see what you're doing having an effect in who they are and who they're going to be down the road, and guys come back and tell you how much it meant to them. And I mean, that's why you do this. You don't do this to get squats and benches up. You'd go personal train if that was the deal.
I tell you, that's what gets me pumped up, man. Starting out the show just like that, that's awesome, because, man, that is why I get out of bed. And I know that's just talking to you before the show, and just what you've talked about so far at the beginning here, just the passion that you have, not only for strength and conditioning, but more so for the people that you're working with. That's really, really cool. I appreciate that so much. And that kind of flows right into our next question a little bit is, what is your program's mission statement, or what are you on mission for? And maybe some of the core values that go along with the culture that you guys are building there.
Yeah, I'm probably going to get the exact quote that we have down as our mission statement wrong a little bit, but this is what I tell our guys and our girls all the time is that my job is to prepare you for the rest of your life. And I tell my young men this a lot, like, my job is manhood training. Like, if we don't do anything else right, like, I don't care if you get faster, if you get stronger, if we prevent injury, if we win a championship, if I don't prepare you to be a husband and a father and a worker and a man of faith, then I'm not doing my job. And I don't care about any of that, because my job is to make you a man first and foremost, or to make you a woman first and foremost, who's going to go out and change the world. And we get a cool opportunity here. I don't know your background of faith, but like Liberty Christian's a Christian school, and I mean they wear their heart on their sleeve when it comes to that. Like, it's almost like working at church camp sometime. It's a really cool place to work, and so we get to talk about faith a lot, and we get to talk about building men and women up, not just to be great athletes, but to be great athletes of faith and great athletes who are following Jesus. And that's our mission right there, is to prepare young people for the future. Like, if I'm not doing that right, if I'm not building character, if I'm not building the things that are going to prepare you for the rest of your life, I don't care what we're doing in the weight room or on the field.
Awesome, Coach. Just in general, just to think about this, being able to not put the cart before the horse, right? To build the person before the athlete is something that, I had the opportunity to go and learn a little bit about, like, three-dimensional coaching. I don't know if you follow that at all, but being able to coach the athlete's heart first, and then go, like, this is the X and O's, and these are the skill acquisition that you need, but more so just coaching to the heart of the athlete, and to say what you're saying and be able to use your faith in that way and lead your athletes and let them know that your mission is not just to be bigger, faster, stronger. It's to actually prepare them for life. That's where I think, most strength coaches are really coming from and saying, you know what, this is bigger than just winning ball games. It's about life. And that is a really cool deal to me, Coach. Can you describe just a little bit more in detail some of the ways that you're doing that? How are you building these boys into men and girls into women in a way that they're going to impact the world? What's some of the intentionality that you put behind what you're doing in the weight room?
Well, I think the intentionality first and foremost is you're trying to build a foundation of character. So we talk about how we want to be disciplined, we want to be consistent, we want to be passionate, we want to be faithful, and we want to be bold. So we coach those things daily, and you do that by holding kids accountable, and you're consistent with your program, and that's words you're hearing out of every strength coach's mouth, because that's what we're trying to build, and it's honestly countercultural to teach kids to be accountable for their actions and to be responsible for the results, and to teach them that, you know what, when you're late, it's your fault. It's nobody else's fault. Because one day when you're going to walk in the workforce and you're going to have a boss and you're going to be late, he's not going to care about your excuses. And one day when you have a wife or a husband and they have an expectation of you, they may care about your excuses, but at the end of the day, you're still responsible for how you're reacting to them and how you're holding up your end of the bargain in your marriage. Or when you're a dad or a mom, and you got kids one day, they're not gonna understand that mommy or daddy had a long day at work and they're tired. You're gonna have to step up to the plate and do your job when you get home. And so when you can bring what you're doing in the weight room and saying, you know what, I'm giving you a consequence for showing up late or for not wearing the right thing or not doing your due diligence on whatever assignment we gave you to do, or not paying attention when the coach spoke to you. And you can bring those to the athlete, and here's why we're holding you accountable in this way. They eat it up and they own it. And they can see, even maybe not in that moment, that, okay, there's a purpose behind what we're doing, and slowly they start aligning with what you're trying to align them to.
A culture of high expectations yields high results, right? I mean, it's like, that's what I'm hearing so much. And
Mm-hmm.
I hear that within your story, man. That's awesome stuff.
Well, I think also I'm really big on, we're going to set high expectations and we're going to set high standards and we're going to build a culture of those things. I think everybody has a desire to do that, but I'm really big on communicating to the athlete why we're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that kids these days, because I remember growing up in ball, like, you just said yes, sir, and you did it, and that was good enough. But I've heard some really good speakers talk about how kids these days have changed, and they want to know the why. Why are we doing this? And that's not disrespectful. That's just the generation that's coming up. And if you can give them the why after the expectation, it doesn't got to be sitting there preaching at them all day. But if you can give them a why associated with it, their buy-in looks so much better.
The thought behind that is such a big deal, because now they can move and they can act and they can communicate with other people with that purpose. And I think that's a defining moment for a program when your athletes can start to tell other people the why behind what they're doing, and that's our goal as a coach, right? You get to the point where you have your student athletes getting to the place where they're feeling comfortable with what they're learning, what they're applying within their, your class or your sessions, however you guys go about it, but to be able to push their teammates to that, or to other student athletes in that way. And one of the things I want to ask you is, if I would ask a student at Liberty Christian School, what would they say the culture of the weight room would look like? What's something that they would say, this is what coach is doing really, really well?
I would hope they would say, and sometimes what you as a coach sees is not what your guys see, but I would hope that they would say that we have a culture of extremely hard work, with consistent discipline, with passion for our brothers, and that we love getting better. Like, I would hope that those are the things that they find in our weight room.
Those are awesome pillars to build your program around. And that leads us right into this next question. It's kind of the namesake of the show, and kind of the way that I try to make sure that we get this back to our mission statement as the podcast is figuring out how are we making the big time where we are at, and what's it look like to be the best that you can be in the situation that you're currently in. And what's that look like for you, Coach? How are you making the big time?
I thought a lot about this question because I've listened to a couple of other podcasts and heard you ask guys that question. And there's a lot of different approaches you could take to this. But I think for me, the thing that really got me bought into coaching at the high school level is that moment when you get young people's barriers broken down. And what I mean by that is this, like, you put the guys or the girls through a really brutal workout. You're pushing sleds, or you're having a big squat day, or, you're having your conditioning day of the week, and you bringing them up at the end, and they're huffing, they're puffing, they're sweating, they're drenched, they're exhausted. And I think there's something special that happens in that moment. I think that cool guy barrier comes off when you're grinding next to your brothers, the guys would say, right? Like you're out there busting your tail next to each other, giving it all you got, and all of a sudden, all those cool guy barriers come down, and you can reach young men and young women at a level that maybe you couldn't reach them just picking them up off the hallway and meeting with them separately. Like, there's something special about that moment when you're physically exhausted, and I feel like their eyes and their ears open up a little bit, and you can really instill some values and some lessons in those moments that maybe you couldn't reach them with any other time. And getting to experience those moments and see young men and young women really open up and just see these lessons you're trying to give to them, see the values you're trying to instill, like, that's the big time for me. That's what really gets me excited about what I do, is seeing those young people finally open up and get it. That's what I say big time is for what we do, because at the end of the day, that's why we do it, right? We do it to change young people's lives.
Those are great examples. That is a great answer to that question. And you're right. People can attack that from so many different angles. And I like the angle that you just attacked it from. That was awesome. The thing that, comes with building a culture and being at a school, you're still pretty fresh, being at the high school level now. What's some of the hurdles that you had maybe in the beginning, or maybe still have right now, and some of the ways that you're overcoming those challenges, and maybe some words of advice for coaches that are just starting in a new situation?
Oh, the organization, the time management has been the biggest hurdle by far. I didn't realize, and part of it's I've never been in charge of a program before. I was an assistant at the college level for so long, and I had teams, but I never had a program, right? And so walking into Liberty, I think the other day I counted up 450 athletes I'm in charge of, because we have middle school too, which is awesome because it lets you have a long-term development program. But if you've ever worked with 11 and 12-year-olds, it's also really challenging. And so learning to manage my time, manage the athletes. I mean, most days you've got, because we have one athletic period, we don't have classes during the day, so all our athletes are going at once. So you've got a group down in the field and a group in the weight room and a group in the girls' weight room, and you're having to really deputize some different coaches to run your system in different places. I mean, if you're not extremely, extremely organized, things are going to go haywire fast. And so that's something that I have had to really grow in, is being organized, being consistent, being disciplined with my time management and my preparation, and making sure that, yeah, it's one thing if I can step out there and coach a speed session, but can I help my assistant football coach learn my terminology, learn my techniques, and be prepared to coach a speed session in the same way that fits into our program? That's a little bit more challenging. And so I would say the organizational skills it takes to run a program with hundreds of athletes and very few resources has been the biggest growing point I've had to make. And we just did it, but I got to a point a few weeks ago, and I've been a traditional Excel guy my whole career. You build your program out in Excel, you're running all your numbers through it, you're entering them in yourself. And I got to the point where I was weeks behind entering in guys' PRs and their new numbers I was supposed to be putting in our program. And I just looked around and said, I've got to find a solution because I'm not doing these guys the service they deserve to keep up with their programming. And we went and pulled the trigger on Teambuildr, and it's been huge for us. I know Teambuildr is your sponsor. I promise I'm not plugging them just because they're your sponsor, but we used some funds we had from Critical Reload, which also was an awesome program. If you're going to be a strength coach at the high school level, I cannot stress enough what a great combination Critical Reload and Teambuildr are. I'm not getting paid to say those things. Those things have changed my program. But we used some funds we had from Teambuildr and or from Critical Reload, and we implemented Teambuildr, and we put iPads at every rack. And they do their weight room view from Teambuildr, and it's been phenomenal. It's been great for my big groups because we're getting our numbers in faster. We're getting our PRs updated quicker. We're keeping up with the progress. We're making better. It's been really, really good for our smaller sports too, like your tennis and your golf, who maybe in the past didn't get as much of the attention that some of the bigger groups got just because of the logistics of things. They're coming in when I'm outside with, there's 6 golfers coming and I've got 30 football players. So golf has a workout, but they're not necessarily getting the same attention that football is. Well, now they can go in, they can keep track of their numbers just as well. So it really has helped a lot of the fringe athletes who aren't as big of traditional weight room sports to kind of get involved and get bought into. It's been a really cool deal for us.
Like you kind of mentioned there, it's awesome that Teambuildr, first of all, is sponsoring our show just because they help so many strength coaches out. But you talked about Critical Reload too. There's just some awesome companies outside in the industry, right, that are helping coaches out so that they can impact the athletes that they have right in front of them. And I'm just so appreciative for people or companies like Teambuildr and Critical Reload. And I'm happy you talked about that. One of my questions that I was going to ask was, how are you structuring things or getting coaches to the point where they can help you out? Because I have some amazing coaches. Like, we legitimately have awesome coaches where I'm at. They know their X's and O's, the relationship building coaches first. They are really, really good at their job. And a lot of them have weight room backgrounds, but it might not be the same terminology or the same system that I run. And just getting everybody on the same page is sometimes a little bit tougher just because, they're focusing on other things. They're teachers, they're coaches first before they're ever a strength coach. What are some of the tools or the ways that you're getting those coaches to kind of understand what you're doing and maybe some more of the ways that they can help you out?
Yeah, that's a huge challenge. And I'm lucky also. We got incredible coaches at Liberty. They bust their tails. They do a great job. They're passionate. A lot of them have been at big time, big 5 and 6A schools in the Metroplex before they came here. And I think the biggest challenge I've had is convincing those coaches that, hey, you're not going to step on my toes to coach, right? Like, I'm a pretty strong personality, so I think a lot of the times they're kind of nervous about, I don't want to coach it differently than Coach Neill coaches. And so what we've done is we kind of work in cycles, and we have a fall, winter, and spring sports cycle. And at each time one of those cycles hits, off season goes into kind of changes around. So like at the end of fall, football comes into off season, guys go into basketball, guys go into wrestling. So you have a pretty big turnover. And then the assistant coaches I have in the weight room, they change over from being the basketball and wrestling coaches to the football coaches. And so what we'll do is we'll have a big professional development day. I call it a strength clinic that we'll do after school. And I've got a packet prepared for them, and we go through as simply as possible the terminology I want. And I really try and emphasize, here's your coaching cues. Okay. So here's what we're our terminology we're using to cue guys to do better. Here's your red flags. And that's something I make a big emphasis on is here are the things I want you looking for that guys are doing wrong. So, squat pattern issues, pressing pattern issues, lateral imbalances, landing pattern issues, those kinds of things that are going to red flag that, hey, you know what? This is a lift that the technique's to the point where somebody could get hurt. And so then I try and give them the tools also to correct those things, to look at, hey, let's test out your ankle mobility, or hey, let's test out your core strength, or let's test out your hinge pattern, stuff like that, to where we can figure out what's going wrong with these athletes. Because when you've got 60 kids in a room and there's just me, and I may be, really controlling the tempo and the pace of the workout, I can't get down and get as in depth with each athlete. So if I can deputize my coaches and say, hey, here's the couple of things you're looking for when you're deadlifting, between the spine being stacked and straight, or them pushing through the heels, or the ankles flaring out too much. Like if I can teach them those things and have them understand what they're looking for, and they're hungry to know it, they're all about ways to get better in the weight room, then we can be a better team and they can be better assistants for me. And really it gives them, it's their guys they're coaching. Like when we're in the off season and fall, I've got the basketball team in there. Well, the basketball coach is one of my assistants in there. So he's all about, hey, let's do the best job we can in here. And so those clinics really help when you can take, it's just an hour and a half out of their week. But if we can take and kind of break down, here's some specific things you're looking for when you're watching squat, deadlift, clean, bench, those types of things that you can correct. Well, now you've got 5 or 6 new sets of eyes and ears in there, and that helps you out tremendously.
Yeah, you've got automatic, 6 new assistants that all have skin in the game that want their athletes to do the best that they can. I mean, that's a big time deal. And I really love your mini strength clinic idea. I really like that idea. And I'm going to try to implement that and steal that as quick as I can. As soon as I put materials together, be able to do that, because, like for the most part, I try to coach the coaches just prior to the session, but I really like being able to sit down and talk through things and be able to say, hey, these are the absolutes that we have to have. And maybe these are some of the things we don't want to see. And as long as we're coaching up those good movement patterns, man, we're going to be on the right track. And that's awesome stuff, Coach. Oh, yeah. One of the things that you talked about and you went into a little bit was critical reload. Maybe that is the thing, or if there's other ways also. But, at a high school, most people, they're trying to figure out a way that they can, furnish their weight room the way it needs so that they can impact the players that they need to. What are some ways that you've acquired additional funding just to be able to, for the day-to-day operations and the big time purchases that you try to get done for your weight room? What's your ways to get that done?
Yeah, critical reloads are a big one by far. It blows everything else we've done out of the water. And I'm at a private school, and one of the issues you face at a private school is there's actually a lot more fundraising that goes on at a private school than a public school. So parents almost get burned out a little bit on getting asked to donate to stuff. So one of the initiatives as a school we've tried to do is really unify our efforts to where we're not every single program a young man or lady's in is asking for money all the time. Because, right, if you got a student athlete and they're in football, basketball, track, band, art, and going on mission trip, well, now you're asking those parents for money like 6, 7, 8 times in the year, and they're at some point they're just like, stop, right? So what we had a couple of different initiatives. Like we did we do this thing in the summer called Night of Champions, and I got the idea from University of Arkansas a couple of years ago, and they came down and they did all their squat testing at the end of the summer in the stadium under the lights. So I was like, oh, that's stinking cool. Let's do that at the end of our summer program. So we invited all the parents out and had the stands filled. We turned up the music. We brought some squat racks and some benches down to the field, and we did all of our end of the summer testing in front of the parents and made a really big deal about it. Well, I tried to make that a fundraiser my first year, and it did really well. I mean, parents donated and stuff, but I think as I've gone along, Critical Reload has been good enough to get us pretty much anything we need. And so I've tried not to ask parents too much outside of that program for money, just to make sure that we're, respecting respecting their buy-in to the school, and that making sure that they feel like they're getting a really good value for what they're giving already.
I need to look a little bit more into Critical Reload and some of the things that it offers. How do you set that up? I know, a lot of other coaches are already doing this, but maybe for me and some coaches that don't even know what Critical Reload is, maybe how do you structure it? What's the process for the athletes, maybe for the payment type of side, and what are they getting in return?
So what we do is, and I'll talk about the payment structure first, and I'll talk about how we distribute it. So I just have the guys pay per semester. The payment process and getting kids signed up and getting them to tell their parents to sign up is just such a hassle to me that doing it monthly just sounded miserable. So what I did is I averaged out the cost per day. Then I averaged out how many days were in a semester, and I multiplied that, and I based the payment off of that. So even though there's a few less days in the fall and the spring, we do the same price fall and spring, and then we, during our summer program, offer a much smaller price since it's only 6 weeks instead of the 13 or 14 you get during a semester. Mm-hmm. And they just pay by semester. So that way a football kid pays for the fall, and then if he's a senior and he's out, he doesn't have to pay for it in the spring. The way we distribute is we have the refrigerated machines they sell set up outside of our weight room. And I know a couple of coaches have done shaker cups or cups with the kids' names on them. And to me, when we were at Cincinnati, we made protein shakes for the guys every day, and we had to sit there and rinse out and wash the cups. And it was just like 30% of our day ended up being just all protein shake prep and cleanup. And no way I was going to be able to handle that. So what I did is I went to Powerade and I bought a bunch of their sideline cups, because a serving of Critical Reload is 8 ounces and their sideline cups are 9 ounces. So I figured, hey, if we give the kids an extra ounce, that's even better. And so what we did is I budget that in through the price of Critical Reload every semester. And so they come in, they get a Powerade cup, they fill it up, they drink it, they toss it. And it's as simple as that. They ain't got to bring shaker cups. They ain't got to find their cup. They ain't got to wash nothing. You get a disposable cup, you fill it, you drink it, and you're on your way. And that makes it really easy for guys to get the product and get on their way to school, especially if like we're having a morning lift and they've got 10 minutes to get dressed, get their shake, and go to class. We keep it accountable by a camera system. I have a sign-in sheet, and they're required to sign next to their name on the day they get their shake, and then a camera keeps them honest from, maybe being tempted to get a double serving or something.
That's a good setup. I appreciate you explaining that. And I know a lot of coaches use that. It's a great fundraiser, great way to do post-workout nutrition. And I think that it could be a really good option for a lot of different people. So thank you for sharing that. Kind of shifting gears a little bit here. What is maybe some of the program methodologies that you've had success with or that you use? And what I mean by that is if a student's in there, what does their program look like? What's it look like for a typical student athlete within your program day to day? Maybe you could talk about the weekly structure, and then maybe some of the systems that you use and kind of the programming styles also. However you want to go about answering that question.
Absolutely. So now one of the things you got to understand first is we are an all-inclusive campus when it comes to grades. So we've got everything from preschool to seniors in high schools on our campus. And that's a challenge because that's a lot of kids with a lot of backgrounds, but it's also a huge advantage for our program because I get to start working with athletes in 6th grade. And that gives me 7 years with a young man or young lady to build a foundation, to slow cook the process, and to prepare them for really peaking at junior, senior year high school and making sure they're reaching their full potential and doing that with as little injury as possible. So I'll go over our middle school for just a brief second first, and then I'll get into kind of our high school structure and what that looks like. At the middle school level, and we're pretty much doing this at middle school and high school as far as our weekly schedule goes, but we're going to have a lift Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So we'll be in the weight room 3 days a week, and we're going to be out in the field 2 days a week, Tuesday and Thursday. I do that because one of the challenges of being in TAPS, which is the private school association in Texas, is that we are limited to 5 hours a week for our athletes, an hour a day. And when you include the time it takes to get them in roll call and they get dressed and get to workouts, really you're looking at about 50 minutes or 45 minutes. So I consider the time in the weight room the most precious, mainly because I can get you in shape right now, but that's not going to benefit you 6-7 weeks down the road as much as building a baseline of strength. And really, at the core of it all, I'm trying to teach movement competency. So I'm trying to teach you to move correctly in the weight room and move correctly in the field. And so at that middle school level, kind of how we structure that is Monday, Wednesday, Friday, we're teaching your foundational movements. I get a lot of our foundational movement patterns from Zach Daycant down at TCU. So we're going to consider every day, we're going to make sure we have a squat. We're going to make sure we have a pull from the ground. We're going to make sure we have a hinge. We're going to make sure we have an upper body pull. We're going to make sure we have a upper body push. And we're going to get those 5 things in every single workout with our foundational movement program. And we're especially with those middle schoolers, we're never loading weight until maybe 8th grade. Like we don't even let them put like 5 and 10 pounds on the bar. We're just teaching tempo, movement pattern being correct. And for most of those guys, that's all they need at that level. I got a couple of studs who develop early and who I say, hey, why don't you come in the weight room after school and we'll actually load up some weight and do a little more progression. But for most of those guys, we're just trying to reinforce the proper patterns of those things. And then Tuesday and Thursday, we try and do really 70% movement patterns outside, and then we'll do about 30% just general conditioning. But Tuesday, I try and really structure around our movement and space patterns, our lateral movement patterns. So we're teaching your shuffle mechanics, your push to move mechanics, your step over mechanics, your change of direction mechanics, your coming to balance. A lot of the stuff Kyle's doing down at Geyer, I've taken from him in those foundational movement patterns. And then your buddy over at Elon, I've taken some of his stuff and kind of implemented that. We're really trying to teach them to control themselves in space. And then Thursday we come in and we work more of your traditional linear movement patterns. So a lot of your track stuff, right? So we're teaching A mechanics, start mechanics, strike mechanics, trying to get that A movement pattern really ingrained. I like Lauren Landau and a lot of his stuff. For those guys, we're trying to teach just really controlling that A position and then teaching strike off the ground and being consistent with the basics of running mechanics on those Thursdays. And then once you get into the high school level, a lot of that same idea carries on, and then I start implementing a little bit more of our advanced methodologies. Not that it's really that advanced. We do a lot of triphasic with a big focus on the eccentric phase. And the reason I say that is your isometric phase and your concentric phase that Cal does, that stuff's awesome. It's really, really good. Mm-hmm. But it requires a lot of body control, right? Like it requires you to be pretty advanced in your movement patterns and your squat and your stuff to make sure you can handle it. But dude, nothing's better for reinforcing movement pattern, reinforcing depth, reinforcing control to that eccentric phase. So we'll go back and we'll spend a lot of time doing, eccentric tempo squats on me. And we're not loading up 70-80% or nothing, but we're just teaching guys, hey, we're going to decelerate that bar until you master this, and that helps us out. I go with kind of a wave pattern for that Monday, Wednesday, Friday program. So every day is obviously going to be total body, but then we're going to call Monday our movement pattern day. So that's the day that we're working on control of the bar in a specific plane of motion. So that's our eccentric, isometric, concentric, stuff like that. Wednesday is going to be our strength day. I'm not a big numbers guy because I think it's that important to being a great athlete. But I am a big numbers guy in the sense that there's something about being 15, right? If you're a 15-year-old kid, numbers mean a lot to you. Like being able to bench a lot's really cool. And if I can get a kid bought in to say, you know what, I love the weight room because I bench stinking 225, and that's super cool. Or I'm going to bench 225. If he's got that goal in mind and that's something he is seeing progress towards, the buy-in goes through the roof. So we let Wednesday really be a strength and power day and explosive day. So we're going to drop our volume down. We're going to work more on our intensities and hitting some of those higher percentages. Or maybe it's a day we come in at certain times of the year and we just work on explosiveness and we work on rate of force development, that kind of stuff. But it's always going to be the lower volume, higher intensity day. And then Friday is going to be our volume day. Get them sore for the weekend. Yeah, if you're going to have a lot of soreness in the week from doing a lot of volume, I want it to happen on Friday. Now, I know I've been talking a long while already, but then that's all off-season programming. In season, which to me is that's the meat and potatoes of your program, especially when you're at a smaller school like I'm at, because we have, I would say 60 to 70% of our athletes are multi-sport athletes in at least two sports, and most of those are three. You're looking at a kid 70%, 80% of the year, he's in season. If you're not developing strength and developing qualities in the athlete in season, they're going to advance him towards his future goals. You're wasting your time, because I think I heard Coach Johnson say on your podcast that I was listening to a couple of days ago, 5 weeks in the summer, that ain't cutting it. Mm-hmm. You're not getting much done in the summer. You're just really kind of hitting the real rubber that meets the road part of your training about week 4 or 5. And then, shoot, it's time for season. So if you're not having a solid strength program in season where you're making gains, you're making progress, and obviously being really, really mindful of what's going on the field and the workload that's going on out there, and then any injuries you got. But you got to make sure that in season is really solid. And so we do, and I call it conjugate, but take that with a grain of salt, because I've been up there and I've met Louis, and it is not his system like in the slightest. But we do conjugate in the sense that in season we're going to have one day devoted to strength, and we're going to have one day devoted to speed. And so we're going to have a rate of force development day, and then we're going to have a day that's a little bit more maximal effort. I'm going to have that more maximal effort. And I say maximal effort in the sense of, we might be doing 5s, 3s, or 1s, and we might be getting more towards the 80, 85% range. And not to say I don't let guys PR in season, but I put a lot of that on them. Like, it's just basically a conversation of, hey, man, how you feeling today? Hey, you feeling good? Dude, add some weight to the bar. Let's see if you can do it. Or, hey, you're kind of banged up. Dude, let's back off. Maybe we get fit sharp. Maybe we adjust the load. But we're going to have one day kind of that's consider our strength day, and then one day that's more doing speed squats, band work, assisted jumps, stuff like that, where we're really working on the plyometric ability and the ability to produce power. I talked for a long time.
Coach, that was a lot I'm still trying to finish up my notes here. That's a lot it was good. I'm going to have to go back and re-listen to it. It's a good thing we're making this a podcast, right? I think there's a lot of good things to take away from that, and I'm going to have to listen to it one more time to make sure I've got everything down the right way. But the last little bit there where you talk about the uninterrupted training time, like that is such a huge deal for the high school athlete, and more so than anything, I just want people to realize that when do you want to be the strongest? Well, heck, you want to be the strongest not at the beginning of your season, but by the end of it. So what the heck are we doing during that season really is going to determine how good we're going to be, what we call, during the championship part of the season, towards the end.
Yeah.
When you're in the playoffs, or when you're trying to make sure you're making a district run or whatever it is, like that is, it just makes too much sense to me not to be able to train like that. And I like your maximum strength or absolute strength day, and then your rate of force development strength day. I think those are a good way to structure it to be like, okay, we can work, maybe more of this max strength a little bit further away from competition. And then if it's a day of competition or a little bit beforehand, the rate of force development is a great way to prime the central nervous system and get ready to roll. All great stuff, Coach. Like I said, I'm still trying to scribble this down, but I like all the stuff that you said. And I just to echo one more time that to be able to start, that 6th or 7th grade time like that you do, that's really cool, really special, because there's, awesome to be able to develop an athlete, but more so that's more time for you to develop a person too, just to be able to be that force throughout their whole career that's going to be there for them is a big deal.
Yeah. And those 6th and 7th graders, man, the cool thing about them is they're so I think when you're, and I talk a lot about manhood and the guys, because that's kind of I'm really passionate about that. Not that I'm not passionate for my female athletes too, because I love working with them. And one of my favorite memories is working with our girls soccer team at Cincinnati, because those girls would like literally run through a brick wall for me. And I had to really learn at that point in my career, like, hey, there is a point where you're pushing too hard, because they don't know that limit and they're just going to go. Mm-hmm. But with those 6th and 7th graders, man, they are hungry for a masculine identity. They're hungry to kind of self-discover at that age. That's kind of the age where you're going from being a kid and you're in those first steps of becoming a man. So you're trying to figure out who you are. And what I've found is those kids just eat up the weight room. They are really hungry for a lot of the values that we get to talk about in the weight room. Because as strength coaches, we get to kind of really talk about a lot of the important stuff in life, about being passionate and being disciplined and working hard and those things, especially those middle school guys, man, they're all ears. They love it. And that's been one of the funnest parts about being at Liberty, is getting to work with those younger guys who they're just sponges. They're sponges, and they eat up everything you say. It's also made me a better coach, because let me tell you what, nothing makes you a better coach than working with 11-year-olds. Like trying to teach these guys who have just hit puberty and they have zero body control, zero body awareness, and they teaching them to RDL is the hardest thing in the world. But I've developed so many more coaching cues working with those guys than I ever got at the college level, because you're working with these college athletes and it's like, okay, do this, and you just demonstrate. They're like, oh, I can do that, and they do it. Mm-hmm. And then you've got an 11-year-old kid, and you're like, okay, do this, and they do the exact opposite. Like, okay, let's try it this way, do this, and then still can't. And then you do that 1,000 times, and finally you figure out exactly the cues that'll finally help a kid click, because they're just not there yet. They're bandy, and that's what's fun about it, and just really hard about it all at the same time.
I would encourage any strength coach to try to go in and watch maybe a high school or a junior high strength coach do what they do, because it is, like you said, man, it is just a different frame of thought. No longer do we spend as much time on X's and O's as we do about technique and form and being able to just progress an athlete in a smart way. And that a way that, you can cue an athlete from the very beginning, like you're talking about with the RDL. Like, I find teaching the hinge is the hardest part, and it's like from there, everything starts to fall in place once an athlete starts to learn how to hinge and get that stuff done. But so many times right now, Gage talked about it a couple episodes ago prior to a show. He talked about how, a lot of strength coaches are kind of bashing on technique in high school and stuff like that. But more so than anything, I think it's just take a step back and let's try to learn as much as we can. And I know there's a couple of guys that are trying to make a push to say, okay, these are things that we can do to learn, maybe some of the ways that we teach things, and they're being proactive in that way. But man, it is a lot of fun to be able to break something down to its very, very, very beginning stage. And you're hitting right on that. That's awesome stuff, Coach. So there are so many things that you have to balance between, junior high all the way up to high school, multiple sports, multi-sport athletes, and just being able to be a family man at home still, like we talked about before the show. There's a lot of things to juggle. But on top of that, I just know so many strength coaches, they just want to be continual learners too. What are you excited about learning and improving on this next year as a coach?
Well, let me tell you, I got a chance to go out to my alma mater at Texas Tech a couple of weeks ago and meet with their strength staff. They were awesome about it. I just sent Joey Burgles a message over Twitter, and he was like, "Yeah, man, stop by." And so I stopped by, and they talked to me for like 3 hours, and the stuff they're doing is super cool out there. I don't know if you've heard of FRC, but they're running that system out there, and it's really about expanding your ranges of motion, and not just how mobile you are, but how strong you are in those end ranges of motion that oftentimes are where you get hurt. And they've seen some really significant drops in injury rates from implementing that when they were at Utah State. And so getting certified in it is super expensive, but that's something that I've taken a few of the basics they showed me, and I've put it into our program. We've already seen some cool benefits from it. But really challenging end ranges of motion and getting stronger in those ranges of motions through something that looks like FRC, even though I'm probably not doing it anywhere near what that is yet. And it's something I would like to get certified in the future. We have done some RPR. I am certified in RPR, and that's been really cool for us. It's kind of difficult to implement on a large scale with kids who don't understand their bodies real well. And so I reserve it for more of our varsity teams who take the weight room serious and are willing to listen, learn, and control. But the guys who have done it have really, really liked it. And it gives us a really good tool for helping guys to be aware of their body and feel different muscle groups and kind of turn on some of those movement patterns that are off. I want to learn more about RPR and how to integrate it better. That's something I want to get better about doing. I've got the tools there, but I haven't quite figured out the best ways to integrate that into our system. And then I just want to learn from those guys around. I mean, we did a really cool thing last summer in DFW. We've got, you've already had like 4 or 5 of these dudes on your podcast, but we've got an incredible brotherhood of strength coaches here in DFW between Monty Sparkman and Kyle Keese and Jeremy Weeks and just a few other guys that are really good at what they do. And this last summer, we just met every Friday. We would go to somebody's school, and there'd be a round table of 6 to 7 of us, and the guys at DBU came down a couple of times, and we would just talk shop. And I learned more from that this summer than any conference I've ever been to. And so doing that again, I'm looking forward to. There's a couple of books I really want to get into. You mentioned Brett's book, Conscious Coaching, and that's the next book on my list that I want to read and really dig into, because he was at a conference down at University of Texas I went to, and he gets people, man. Like he understands athletes' minds and how they think, and I want to dig into some of the stuff he was talking about and learn more about how to reach guys. Because I think, like we kind of started the podcast off with, like if you're not reaching guys, then none of the other stuff matters. Like you've got to learn to dig in there and build that relationship if you're ever going to be successful as a coach.
Those are 3 really big things, right? So you talked about what was it, RCP? What was it?
It's called FRC, Functional Range of Movement Conditioning, FRC.
Okay, I've not heard of that. I want to look into it now. You sparked my interest with that, so I want to look into that a little bit more. You say Joey Burgles.
On the cusp of it.
Okay.
I'm not certified in it. I barely know anything about it. All I know is like 1 or 2 techniques that he kind of showed me that they were doing. Mm-hmm. And I mean, dude, it's like the next level stuff. It's going to be really, really big. I know MLB has a lot of guys buying into it, but the course itself is pretty pricey, and they don't offer it all over the place. So I'm not sure that's something I'm going to be able to get certified in this year, but I really want to, because it's stinking good stuff.
And then I'm starting to see a decent amount of RPR stuff out there. It started, the first time I really heard about it was with Cal Dietz, and it was interesting then. And now I've done a little bit more research with it. And then I would just echo one more time with the Conscious Coaching. Great book. Forces you to dig deeper into maybe some of the whys that you're doing things, but then also just like being able to read your players, kind of know kind of their characteristics a little bit more so that you can use your strengths to coach them to the best of your ability. And I really like breaking it down like that, at least thinking through it, not classifying every single one of my athletes, but maybe to see some trends and that type of stuff. It's just been fun to think about it in that way. So Brett did a really good job with that. We're coming to the end of the show here. You've thrown out so much awesome information. One of the things I like to do here at the end is we do 5 questions, and I want to know some of your favorite things and just let listeners get to know you just a little bit more. Are you ready for these quick questions?
Yeah, go for it.
Awesome. All right, Coach, what is your favorite book?
Favorite book is the Bible. I think the wisdom, whether you're a believer or not, there's so much wisdom and just good stuff you can pull from that. But that's the foundation of my life. So the Bible's number one. If you're talking from strength conditioning, the first strength book I ever read was Starting Strength, and I still go back and reread Ripeto's stuff on the foundations of movement of the big three, and just ingrain myself in the way he coaches that stuff. I love Starting Strength. I think it can't be emphasized enough how that foundation builds for being a good coach.
That's a great book. That got a lot of people started, right? I mean, Mark Rippetoe, first of all, stuff on T Nation really got me hooked on his writing. Even though he's being controversial, I love just reading what he had to say. It was humorous to me, but also so many great points within his writing. So great stuff there, Coach. Who is a person that has influenced you the most?
Well, I'll say in my personal life, my father has influenced me the most. He's an incredible man. You should see him with my 2 sons. He's 65 years old and still jumps down on the floor with them and just throws them around and plays for hours. And he's a man who just gives of himself more than you think somebody can give of themselves. Like, he's just one of the most selfless, caring human beings I've ever met, and he inspires me to be a better man every day. And then if you want to talk about my influences and strength, definitely my 2 bosses that I worked for when I was at the collegiate setting kind of set the tone for my career and taught me why what we do can be so important. And my first boss was Joe Walker. He worked at Auburn and then Texas Tech and then Cincinnati. And working for him was really cool because you learned that he taught me that when you're coaching, you're giving 100% of yourself. Like, you're going to sacrifice your own comfort. You're going to sacrifice the way you're feeling to make sure you're giving your athletes 100% every time you're on that floor. Like, if you're on that floor, you're coaching hard. And it doesn't matter if you're coaching 8, 9, 10 hours that day or coaching 1 hour that day. You're giving those athletes everything they need to achieve what they need to achieve. Mm-hmm. And then I learned a lot from Pat Moore, who was my boss at University of Texas, and he's now at University of South Florida. And he taught me so much about building relationship with guys and really the character behind coaching and how to relate to guys that maybe I didn't have that much in common with, but to really build those foundations of relationships that you can't really affect a guy until you've built that with them. So those guys are my 2 big career influences.
Those are great people, just in general, to have, obviously your dad, but then the other 2 to be able to invest in your life like that. That's really cool stuff, Coach. How about your favorite quote?
My favorite quote's actually from Aristotle, and I put this on almost every handout we give our guys, and it's on the screen in our weight room, and we got it written on the walls, and it's, we are what we consistently do. Excellence is therefore not an act, but a habit. That's one of my favorite quotes of all time, because the thing I've seen in athletics and even outside of athletics, just in life, is that, like, more often than not, people don't destroy their lives with big, dumb acts. It's doing little dumb things over and over and over. And more often than not, people don't achieve greatness in big moments. They just consistently do the right thing and consistently give a little bit more over and over and over again. So that's my favorite quote.
I've heard that, but to be able to break it down like you just did and put a little bit more meaning behind it, I really like that. I agree with what you're saying there. Definitely is a sum of a bunch of small events, and that's how your character is formed and your identity is formed. Is all those small moments. So very cool. Maybe this one will be interesting to hear, because I was looking at your old Texas Tech profile, and it said you're 6'6" and like 290 or 300, something like that, right? So you got 15 minutes to train. What are you doing? And like when I asked Monty Sparkman, he said something like, "Oh, you might not believe this, but I think I would go with deadlift." I just want to hear what you got. See if it's in line with what Monty says or not.
So, and not only are you not going to believe this, but I don't think a lot of my buddies that are going to listen to this podcast will believe it. Because if I've got 15 minutes, it's really not enough time for me to hit my big lifts, right? Like I'm getting kind of old. If I'm going to deadlift, I need some time to get warmed up and to get RPR in, get everything done. So if you give me 15 minutes, I'm going to get on the Concept 2 rower and crush 5,000 meters. And I'm the biggest meathead around, right? Like, that's been my I am the stereotypical meathead. I get in there and lift all the time. But I actually do love the rowing machine. I love that in about 5 minutes usually I can kick my own butt so bad that I'm laying on the floor wanting to die. So that would be my 15-minute workout.
Well, I'm still trying to pick my jaw up off the floor. That did catch me off guard, but I like it. I'm glad I'm really glad that I asked that question. So good. All right. Last question here for you, Coach. Who is a small school coach who is killing it and deserves a shout out?
So I think I've mentioned a bunch of good names already. We got a cool little network here in DFW, and I know I'm forgetting some guys too. Kyle Kiesick-Geyer does a great job. Monty Sparkman does a great job. One guy that I've really built a pretty cool relationship with, and I've seen do a lot of great things, especially when it comes to character and leadership development, is Jeremy Weeks at Dallas Jesuit Prep. He runs a really cool program, and I got to go visit him during one of his sessions this summer when we were in an off week, and he does a really good job of building up leadership in his young men, and that's a guy who's doing an outstanding job over there.
Awesome. I'm gonna have to reach out to him. He'll be somebody that will be awesome to continue to reach into that Texas network a little bit, but just to know more and more about character development. I really like all the stuff that you hit on today. It just makes me think, am I truly on the right path for all this stuff? So thank you for hitting on that so much. This next little bit here, can you kind of give us the best way for people to reach out to you? They want to continue this conversation. They got questions for you. You mentioned like the Night of Champions, right? I'm sure a lot of coaches would be interested to hear how you set that up, maybe some of the other things that you're doing there. What's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, you can reach I don't do the Instagram thing a lot, but I do get on Twitter quite often. My Twitter handle is @DNeill62. Or you can go through, I have a separate Twitter for our strength and performance department. Warrior Strong LC is that one. You can also email me at davidneill62@gmail.com. And I'm pretty good about responding. It may not be that day, but it'll be pretty quick if I can.
Great. Thank you, Coach, for getting those. I'll get that in the show notes for everybody out there. Link those up for you. So just to finish this out, Coach, I want to really extend a thank you being able to schedule this with me and take the time to talk. And I really appreciate you being able to pour not only into me, but to all of our listeners and people that are tuning in each week. So You're the man. Thank you, Coach.
Yeah, thank you, Preston. I think it's a really cool thing you're doing here. And, it's our field at this level is growing. And, I'll tell you what, I've learned more from being a high school strength coach than I did at the college level, just because of A, the necessity of it, but B, that, everybody's just willing to share and help each other out. And there's not a lot of ego involved. And so I think what you're doing is going to be a really cool piece of that's going to grow and grow and help this field out tremendously. So yeah, it's awesome you're doing this, man. I think it's huge.
Thanks, Coach. Me and Gage really appreciate it. That's awesome to hear and know that hopefully it's making an impact. So once again, Coach, thank you.
For sure.